Hello and welcome to Autistic Radio. The 555 show is where we talk about the Facebook that Harry creates. It's not one of those ordinary kind of Facebook pages. What Harry does is he specifically finds the things out there that are most interesting to us that will start a conversation for the show. Sometimes it's possible that we will say things that don't express what the original poster might be putting down there, because we use what's there in the public domain of social media to inspire us to say things that are in our own heads. None of this is intended to be critical of the original poster. We're all different, we all have our own ideas, and we all have things that we want to think about. If there's a possibility that you wish to put your words out there, then the 555 is a place where you can join the group and be part of it. Most people, however, start by coming into the 444 drop-in. The 444 is 4:44 p.m. UK time every Sunday. The 555 is 5:55 p.m. every Sunday. Starting with the 444 is a way that you can join in with the conversation in text or just listen, and also put your voice to it when you feel comfortable, if that's what you wish to do. The 444 is intended to be autistic people supporting each other and always being reliably there. So even though today is an Easter holiday, a religious holiday for many people, the 444 was still there an hour ago, just the same as we're making this recording for the 555. At least 50 weeks of the year we are reliable here at Autistic Radio, and that's important to us all. Harry, it's time. Let's have the show.
Thanks, Jules. Good evening, everyone. This is Harry's Facebook for Sunday, the 20th of April, 2025, Easter Sunday. So, happy Easter, everyone, or everyone that celebrates Easter. And the first post we're going to start with this evening is from Reach Every Voice, which is a disability service and described as a practice of educators working with non-speaking and minimally speaking autistic students. We teach these students to express themselves with alternative communication. We also collaborate with families and schools. And what they've shared is the following. Many well-meaning people, family, teachers, behaviourists, completely misunderstand the behaviours of autistic individuals, and it often leads to people giving up. Challenging behaviours are often seen as volitional defiance. He refuses to sit, she won't do what I ask, and can lead to teachers or parents saying, that's it, I'm done. If they don't want to do it, we're not doing it. It sometimes pushes people to the opposite extreme, the power struggle, the we are going to sit here until you do this, or the idea you have to finish the thing you said you were going to do, like a page or 3 math problems. Instead of continuing with our agenda or giving up, we, as parents, teachers, and communication partners, need to listen to and respect feelings of anxiety and dysregulation. Certain behaviours are actually coping responses. In her book, Beyond Behaviours, Mona Delahouque writes, we fail to recognise that many behaviours represent the body response to stress. They're ways of compensating for and dealing with a body that experiences sensory and motor differences. We need to remember that our students don't want to give us a hard time. They are having a hard time. presume competence. What's people's thoughts on this?
Oh God, wow, I really want to jump in as quickly as I can on this, Harry. It's really well put, and it follows a theme that I am trying to impress upon the professionals in behaviourism out there. When I was at the recent conference, and I will do it again at the next conference, the thing that I said to them that garnered a lot of them contacting me separate to say what the power was in the talk that I gave was when I discussed the misunderstanding that people attempting to support people had about the behaviours that they were observing. And I put the proposition that as an autistic man, I was able to empathise with what I saw in front of me in an autistic person, whether that person be an autistic child, an autistic man, woman, transgender, whatever type of autistic person. I put forward the proposition that just being autistic gave me a little bit of a key of empathy that meant that I would interpret what I was seeing in front of me very differently from what they were interpreting. And I have to say that they accepted that. People came back to say that what they were trying to do in this country, in this small group of forward-thinking, progressive behaviourists, I'm not going to talk about the whole gamut of different behavioural interventions that exist out there in the whole world, just this group of people, they are trying to get it. They don't get it, but they're trying to get it. And if we can get them to interpret our behaviour in a more accurate way, then I believe that some of the things that they do in behaviourism will have some validity for us. I think a lot of autistic people, when they're hearing me say that here on Autistic Radio, are going to spit feathers, just on the basis that I'm saying that it might have validity.
I like these posts that it's basically a reminder, or maybe even giving a lesson, educating about not assuming. Because people that are well-meaning, and people were kind of listed there, but a lot can be friends and all that as well, is they try to do the best thing, what they think in their head is the best thing. A lot of parents, I believe, are trying to be understanding, but they feel that discipline and a large scope is the best way to combat the issue they feel they need to combat. Because it's been misunderstood if a child is kind of behaving distressed, basically like a meltdown, which may be misinterpreted as a tantrum. It's like, well, they can't get away with this. They must be punished for that and causing a scene or causing distress to the parent or causing distress to other people. So it's nice that these sort of posts come up to remind people it's not as simple as that. It's not as simple as being good and being bad. It's about being understanding of how different people being are and how they live and how they respond and how they feel. Because a lot of the time, I mean, I can remember being young myself and there was a lot of sensitive things like loud noises, crowded places and things like that. But that's with communication where I speak. But there's people that have communication that's different, that's alternative, and that in itself is another thing that organisations and people are trying to get people to understand as well. It's not just about talking. It's about communicating in different ways and taking it on board and pursuing competence. So is someone to speak?
I can't tell who's muted or not here on the screen. But I was going to ask about assumed competence, because it seemed to come up what you just said there, Harry, and the earlier what Jules said was this idea of the behaviourist community as it's their interpretation of that assumed competence. So am I right in understanding it in that context?
I think they don't understand necessarily, and I think there is such a difference in what a behaviour might mean for an autistic person and for a non-autistic person. It requires a specialism that not all professionals have. In fact, I would say it was rare for them to have it. So my cooperation with them is not about saying that they have it right. It's actually saying that this is something that they need to look at, and they need us to help them to reinterpret things. They need the autistic community to help them to interpret things. Somebody in the text has written this assumed normativity. The power struggle. What creates the judgment that behaviour is challenging? Under what criteria? And on, is it an assumed normativity? And yes, you know, the criteria is in the is produced by the outside body. And yes, I believe it is an assumed normativity in most circumstances. The most progressive professionals, and it takes a lot for them to be that progressive, get the idea that of the difference, of the neurological difference, and of the neurodiversity paradigm. But an awful lot of it is thinking that they've got it because they have the words that they can use. But I don't believe that until they experience it a bit more deeper with us guiding them, that they will get it emotionally. I think they're trying, but I think they're failing. And that's why I'm not willing to just say ban ABA, because it's out there, it's big, it's enormous, and it's growing, and banning isn't going to happen. We need to change it and get the best people of them to then explain it to the worst people of them. That's why I want to cooperate with them to some degree, is to change what they do and change what they understand, so that we put the input in.
Yes, a neurodivergent solution, an autistic solution, because you can't just round up all these people and tell them to stop and disappear. You know, you have to work with them. It's like any problem in life, it won't go away.
The next post is from I've Been Autistic All Along, who's a blogger, sharing my experience of late diagnosed autism ADHD with memes, cats, sunsets sprinkled in, qualified autism peer support worker. And what they've shared is about the Autism All Along workbook. And what they say is, what is the Autistic All Along workbook? It's a guided self-reflection tool designed for late discovered autistic adults, diagnosed or self-identified. It helps you explore your autistic identity, build self-compassion, and develop practical strategies for living authentically. Who's this for? Adults who recently discovered they're autistic. Anyone struggling to understand how autism shows up in their life, and people looking for self-compassionate ways to support themselves. What's inside? Thoughtful prompts to help you reflect on your experiences, a deep dive into masking, burnout, sensory needs, and boundaries, practical strategies to support your well-being, and encouragement to embrace your true self without judgment. What's people's thoughts? Has anybody read this book?
No, but I'm curious about this phrase, your autistic identity. The only real understanding I have of that phrase is what I've shared with other autistic people in an autistic community. I think that's where one gains an understanding of what is meant by that phrase, your autistic identity, because there is a fear I have that a lot of it is inherited. It's almost conditioned. It comes from outside. That's just my first reaction. I'm sure there's a lot more into this if we discuss what it's actually about.
I've not read it, but I quite like workbooks like this if they're done well. And yeah, it sounds like there's thoughts that are coming to my head are a bit like it. I got some help from an OT to look at some of my sensory needs, which to help me with my kind of daily living activities. And it sounds like it would kind of be like a kind of DIY version of that as well, like trying to help you sort of like figure yourself out. And sometimes it's just like there's just sometimes little ways of asking questions and reflecting on things that can just help you to see things like from a new perspective.
Yeah, Nicola, it made me think of what you'd said a couple of weeks back, or was it even months back, about a booklet you'd picked up from a local community resource, yeah, on self-management to a certain extent.
Yeah, that was like, I remember saying, I just wish that I could find out all the things that I'm responsible for, teaching my kids as they're trying to grow up. If there was some list somewhere and the person was like, well, actually, and gave me this little booklet, and it's like talking about all the kind of, yeah, like it was kind of looking at all the different activities of your life that you might have to go through to get all your needs met and how you could approach them. So yeah, I found that quite helpful.
Yeah, almost like a how to be a person manual. I've got a lot of these good housekeeping books from the 1920s and 30s that are really amazing, about like how to run a home, how to mend something, how to get a certain type of stain out of a certain type of material. They're amazing wee books. But because it's just the way my mind works, I hear these things and I think, what are we learning here? How to be autistic? But then again, that's me just putting a negative turn on it. The positive turn could be like, okay, I am autistic. I have an autistic experience. What's the best way of managing this? Or what is the current thinking on shared thinking on what this experience is like and how to manage it and be with it?
I like these books, although I don't really read anything like that now. But I've read, or at least seen, these sort of things, over the years. It's like someone's firstly, it's someone's experience. And then what they also do is they realise sometime down that journey, probably earlier on in the journey, that it's a unique experience they have, and it's not just a general autistic experience, it's their autistic experience, because they speak to other people and they realise, as I've done in the past, people with autism, everybody's different, just like basically everything else. And it's like it's a collection of these kind of sound bites, kind of even maybe researched, and all collected into one workbook, which would be limited in a way because you can't get everyone, but it's certainly a starting point for some people. And the language as well, I like. It's like there used to be the word diagnosis, and it still gets used because people are diagnosed. I mean, I was diagnosed, and other people are diagnosed and get a certificate. The medical sort of kind of rubber stamp of you're autistic, because that's the way that autism comes about in many people's lives. But other people's lives, people realise it's a way that they are, and it's like they're self-identified. And it's still quite a lot of people this way feel that they're on the outside, because there's a bit of resentment saying, you're not really autistic, you need to get the diagnosis, you're not part of our club. That sort of kind of nonsense you seem to get everywhere. But I like that sort of inclusive language, so that everyone, or at least most people, you want to say everyone, you say that a good amount of people, if not everyone, would feel included and feel that book would be worthwhile having a look, at least just a look over, if not a complete read over. It's just nice. It's not just about, obviously, autistic people, it's also kind of educating other people regarding autism and what to expect and break down stereotypes.
Yeah, just put in the notes here to explain it that, we talk often about advocacy, and it's something that happens to people who may be energised by their self-discovery in this context. So I put that, would I ever feel I have to help other autistic people with my insights? Because in the second part it said, I could be quite unique in my responses, it's particular to myself and my own circumstances. But I suppose we're all out there trying to find a common language, having a shared experience, because, that inclination to isolation is not necessarily a positive thing.
I feel like for me, I wouldn't be just like, randomly just want to just do books for just because I'm autistic. But I did a kind of wee course that was similar. I think it was like Neurodivergent Lou. We've read some of their stuff before, and it was like their work on burnout. I found it really, really helpful, actually, and I found it really there was quite a few wee bits and pieces that I kind of carried with me. Like, I didn't take all the whole thing, but there was definitely parts of it that have been helpful. So I don't think there's any pressure at all to kind of go off and do that. But I think if there's like a burnout and an actual issue in somebody's life, it's good to, I don't know, I think it's just about having resources there. And my experience of the burnout thing is I didn't feel like it was somebody sort of self-righteously kind of preaching to me about how to live at all. Like, it was much more of a kind of, I just felt like a bunch of tools and a bunch of things. Well, this autism seems to have some commonalities, and like a lot of people find this, and it was like, is it relevant to me? Yes or no? And I could just throw it away if it isn't.
I think you're right there, Nicola. I agree with particular issues. It's good to get a bit of advice if somebody's been through a similar experience and has some kind of insight to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the important thing to me is these documents aren't preachy, and they certainly don't come across as it's that way or their way or no way, and that has happened in the past. Not just by kind of documents, but people actually speaking and doing presentations. It's like, I know autism, and if you disagree with anything I say, you're not really autistic. I know it sounds absolutely ridiculous, but there has been instances that that's happened, and it's caused a lot of hurt and strife, and that's something you want to avoid. So it's good when these sort of things, they're given advice and it's careful with its language, and it's basically just given information that may be helpful.
I like how Nicola expressed it. This kind of, if it has relevance, if it resonates, it's useful, and pick a mix, pick out the bits you find useful to you and move on. And more of the resources that are out there now are like that. But what Harry says, it still persists. There are still these little cliques, these little groups of autistic people who get together, and they've been together for a long time, and there's an orthodoxy within it, which is, for people like myself who are identified as autistic late in life, absolutely repugnant. The idea that somebody can advocate for the whole of autism is ridiculous. And I like the idea that whoever we are as an autistic person, whatever we have to say about our own unique, separate personal circumstances, will be an advocacy for someone. And we don't have to do the thing that often as autistic people we expect, which is to have the whole picture, the complete picture, and then be able to present it. We don't have to do that. And the people who think they've done that are simply wrong, and they're damaging to the whole idea as we go forward.
The next post is from Autistic Village, which is an education website, and describes itself as an autistic community that seeks to educate about autistic community culture and identity. And what is shared is, it says, this may be performative exercise, but in the hope that it isn't, I will post the links in the comments, which I'll go into later. And basically what it is, it says that the UK government is launching research into how to support autistic people better. And positive note, they use autistic and not people with autism. They are looking for submissions from autistic people with or without diagnosis. So if you're in the UK and have the time, battery, bandwidth, please consider getting involved. So I looked at the link to UK Parliament, and it was announced on 2nd of April. And it says, call for evidence launched to mark World Autism Acceptance Day. And it says, to mark World Autism Acceptance Day, the House of Lords Committee on the Autism Act 2009 is today launching its call for evidence, inviting written contributions to its inquiry. The background, it says, the committee wants to understand how well the Autism Act, the government's autism strategy, and the statutory guidance are working so that it can make specific practical recommendations about what the government should do next. The committee is seeking evidence on key questions about how to improve support for autistic people, including how can public understanding and acceptance of autistic people be improved? How can the government improve assessment, diagnosis, and post-diagnostic support? How can the government improve the identification and support of autistic people when they need it, including if they do not have a diagnosis? How can access to healthcare be improved? How can community support be improved? How can access to education be improved? How can support for autistic people to find and stay in work be improved? How can support for autistic people who are in contact with criminal and youth justice systems be improved? The committee wants to hear from a wide range of people and organisations with different experiences and perspectives. We particularly welcome your views if any of the following apply to you. You're an autistic person, including if you have a diagnosis or if you consider yourself autistic. If you have an autistic person in your family or you care for, support an autistic person. You work with autistic people in your job and you work on research into how to support autistic people. To give everyone interested the opportunity to respond, the call for evidence is open for 2 months, which is longer than usual. The committee invites interested people to submit written evidence by Monday the 2nd of June 2025. We are very grateful to autistic people working with national autism charities who gave us feedback on call for evidence document to help us. We are grateful to autistic people working with national autism charities who gave us feedback on the call for evidence document to make it accessible. We want to make sure you can send us evidence in a way that works for you. You are welcome to work with someone else, such as a friend, family member, or carer, to prepare your evidence. Ask someone else to submit evidence on your behalf. Ask for help from an organisation that supports you to prepare your evidence, or submit a voice recording as evidence, which we will transcribe into a published written document. You should try to make sure that your submission is no longer than 6 pages long in total. If your submission is longer than 6 pages, you should include a 1-page summary. This is because we may receive a lot of submissions from different people and we don't, and this is because we may receive a lot of submissions from different people and we want to be able to consider each one carefully. So, you can send us your written submission online in the Word document format using the form available online, or you can send your written submission or voice recording by email to hlautismact2009@parliament.uk. Further information is available on the committee's website, and you can contact on the email that I've already given if you need to send us your evidence or if anything is unclear. So a bit of a mouthful, but I just thought it was very important to read this out and just to ask, has anybody heard about this?
No, but thanks for drawing attention to it, Harry.
Yeah, it seems really important. I was thinking, like, I'd be interested in having a conversation with you a lot more about it as well. Those are some questions I'd love to dream about.
Yeah, if you want to lead on that, Nicola, perfectly, we'll arrange it for you.
Yeah, sounds good.
I don't know what it is. I think it's just maybe a defensive thing. Even though you want to see things like this happening, conversations and that more understanding and acceptance, as they call it, it's when a government does something or is doing something, is how they're going to do it and how worthwhile it's going to come or become, because you're that kind of cynical about, because you've been involved, and maybe many of us have been involved in so many things with different organisations, governments, councils, etc. And it feels like it's been a lot of effort for very little. So, I mean, that's what Autistic Village was saying on their post. It's like, this might just be this kind of exercise thing that governments generally do, because local authorities have done it in the past as well, in quite recent times. So, but it's this feel like an opportunity to get the voice out there and get information out there. So yeah, I'm quite pleased to see that. I'm a bit apprehensive about it.
My expectation is that it's the same usual suspects that are going to reply to this, and that their voice will be much clearer and much more easy to assimilate. The big charities, the organised autistic groups that put themselves out as representative of a much bigger population than they actually are. And this is asking for people to give very personal, grassroots experiences. And the more people who write from their own personal grassroots experience and put it into this, the more chance there is that the usual suspects the power of them will be diluted. However, yeah, I get it. It does look performative. It's really well set out if you look at the website, but it does look performative. And personally, I think I will put my efforts into autistic radio instead. But I hope other people will take up this opportunity. We have something in Scotland that is different at the moment. The pressure towards the learning disability and autism bill, and also the call for an ombudsman, very different to what's going on down in England, because they've had this act since 2009.
That's an important point, that this is not Scotland.
Yeah, I'm picking up on that now too.
Yeah, I'm just kind of realising that sometimes you just get caught out. It's important to share, and I'm glad we're talking about it, because we're kind of global anyway, as you know, as a radio, as a Facebook page, because we share, things with the United States and all that. It definitely doesn't, affect us, and in other areas as well. It's Australia, Canada. So yeah, but sometimes because of the makeup of how the UK is and where Scotland sits, there's things that are kind of joined, or you assume that are joined, and there's things that are totally different in terms of laws and governments and things like that. So yeah, it's good to bear in mind that. But it's good that this is happening now, even though, as I said already, I'm apprehensive.
What happens south of the border is very, very influential on what happens north of the border, because it's the same big charities that span the populations.
I wanted to say how much I would love it if our reply as Autistic Radio was a total questioning of power, much more than giving them data about us.
I think it should be.
Here.
So you've got a plan already, Nicola?
I'm in the moment.
Yeah, in the moment. It's all about relationships. It's like people expect that there's this procedure, with politics and power, that kind of relationship, and we've got to be complicit with it, and it's disempowering, you know what I mean? It isn't power at all. But Jules makes a relevant point that it's people who are complicit and play the game, who are part of the business model, will be participants, active participants. Meanwhile, general alienation exists, with power. So we have to ask them questions about power.
And if anybody wants to send us inspiring artwork about this, let's do it.
The next post is from the Scottish Ethnic Minority Autistic CIC, a non-profit organisation which strives to improve understanding of being autistic from the various communities of the global majority. And it's a post about wishing a blessed Easter, Pasha, to all who celebrate. To everyone observing Easter, we send you warmth, reflection, and joy as you honour this sacred time of resurrection, renewal, and light after darkness. We know that for many autistic people, especially those from racialised or faith-based communities, this season can bring complex emotions. The weight of grief or exclusion in traditional spaces, the overwhelm of loud gatherings, strong sense or unspoken social rules, the deep spiritual connection that often goes unseen or misunderstood. And yet, there is grace and stillness, meaning that quiet rituals and joy in celebrating in ways that feel authentic. Whether you're attending midnight liturgy, sharing a meal with loved ones, or honouring the day through personal reflecting, your way of observing is valid, sacred, and enough. What's Jules' thoughts on this?
So we're going to raise the subject of Easter.
Well, it's Easter Sunday.
It's strange. I'm kind of going through dumping a lot of old books, and a book appeared in my hands this morning. It was called Easter, and it's by a woman who worked for the Anthroposophical movement. Try pronouncing that one when your teeth aren't fitting right. Anthroposophical, right? Steiner, right? So it's a strange wee angle on Easter, you know, explaining its kind of mythical and elemental roots. But if you take it as just like another event like Christmas and things like that, these organized kind of holidays, and Easter being a varying one, you know, I can be a wee bit cynical about these things, but I know there is a need there for people to be a part of some kind of seasonal shift, which is in the post, you know, when they talk about spiritual, I need to get that page up again, the deep spiritual connection that often goes unseen or misunderstood. Yeah, and quiet rituals and all that. So Easter, what does it mean for you?
I mean, this post, like the similar post to Ramadan and Christmas and other events, it's like it raises the point, the issue, the debate, the subject of people misunderstanding or people having this sort of, or society having this set rule of how a festival or an event or occasion should be celebrated. And if you do it in a way that people think it's too different, there's something wrong with you. Like, you know, especially when you're autistic, where you don't want to be involved too much in loud spaces and loud noises and all that. You want to do things yourself or do something different. Like, I can recall kind of reading stuff from different places about Christmas and how films and media, and it's like there's a so-called normal that doesn't exist. It's kind of made up, but it's sort of kind of, that's what you should aspire to, and that's the way you should celebrate an occasion. But we know, kind of talking about it, it doesn't make any sense. You celebrate it in your own way, whether it's a big way or a way it's a nice, quiet, spiritual way. Especially things like Easter and Christmas and Ramadan. A lot of stuff, it's a lot of religious stuff. A lot of it is quiet reflection. It doesn't have to be big celebration. It could be quieter, and there's nothing wrong with that. But some people seem to come across as if you do something quiet, if you celebrate something quiet, you're not celebrating it properly, and then you're criticised. You should be celebrating better than that. You're not making an effort. You know, that sort of nonsense. So that's what that reminds me of, and it's just to remind that you do things your own way, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I like the quiet approach, Harry. Isn't that what the Quakers are all about? But yeah, anybody can be quiet, and I think it's a core kind of thing on some in the neurodivergent community to be quiet, because noise and sensory stimulation is a wee bit too much for us.
I don't do very well with any of the celebrations because, just because of the changes of routine, it would probably ask of me. But I had, I remember I had a couple of friends, like probably about 15 years ago, and they celebrated everything on they were having pancakes on that pancake day, is it Shrove Tuesday? They had all of the celebrations and they went all in, and it was like, it was really, really fun to be around and stuff. But yeah, no, I'm not very good at celebrations.
There's something about this post that makes me feel uncomfortable. And that's its last paragraph. It says, "We invite Christians to pay attention to the destruction of lives and churches witnessed in the Holy Land and take action to stand up for the crimes being committed against Orthodox Christians." And there's something slightly clumsy about that paragraph for me, unless they really mean it just to be aimed at Orthodox Christians. Because in the Holy Land at the moment, the main religious group that is being persecuted is the Muslim religion. And that is being perpetrated by a government from outside a distinct country and distinct land. And it would be more comfortable to me if this group, who represent a wide range of different people, hadn't just picked out one religion. If they had it more broadly over people of all faith and none, because the real crime is against human beings, and it is not your religion that gives you value, it is your humanity that gives you value. But maybe it's just a slight clumsy wording.
I think it is a clumsy attempt, Jules, to gain some alignment, of empathize with us who are perhaps more aligned with, as you put it, the religion that is suffering most over there. But what confuses me is the phrase Orthodox Christians. Is that accurate? I mean, there is a difference between the Christianity practiced in the West and Orthodox Christianity, which is usually, Greek Orthodox, isn't it, and Russian Orthodox. So in the Middle East, is that the Christianity that's present there? Not necessarily the Christianity we practice, that is practiced in our country. It's a bit confusing, yeah.
Well, I can explain it from Google. The question, how is Orthodox different from Christianity? The Orthodox Church holds to many of the same beliefs as the Catholic Church, but in different ways. They would agree on the importance of scripture and tradition and the views of the Eucharist, but disagree as to which traditions. They don't hold to a pope, but they do have their own ruling body. So it is to call it Orthodox Christians, it is a small group of people that they are particularly picking out there. It's not Protestant, it's not Catholic, it's Orthodox Christians.
The next post is from Emergence Divergence, the Neurodivergent Ramblings of David Gray Hammond. who's an author of books, writer of blogs, advocate, mentor, trainer, and self-described as professional nuisance. And what they shared is about the ethics of restraint and seclusion for autistic people. And what he says is, autistic people are disproportionately victimised by the use of restrictive practice, also known as restraint and seclusion. Finding accurate statistics on the frequency of such events is tricky. Reporting by the professionals using restrictive practice is inconsistent, and many of those autistic people subject to it are unable or unwilling to report it for a variety of reasons. I have previously considered the use of such practice in the inpatient setting, but I feel it necessary to take a broader look at the ethics of restrictive practice in general. So what is restraint? Restraint is the intentional limiting of a person's bodily movement. It can be applied by another person, physical restraint, mechanically through use of straps and other mechanical devices, or even chemically through the use of sedative medications. In all cases, there is of significant injury or death, such as in the case of Max Benson. What is seclusion? Seclusion is the restrictions of a person's liberty, usually via the use of isolation rooms. A person on seclusion is usually removed from the presence of other people by force, and as such is likely to have also been restrained. Is restrictive practice ethical? In terms of Western culture, there is a legal right to bodily autonomy. This means that a person has a right to use their body as they wish and not have their body touched or manipulated without consent. In this regard, restrictive practice sits opposed to a person's right to that autonomy. There are some complications to the assumption of autonomy. Any diagnosis of a condition that means a person does not perform a neurotypical embodiment can be used as grounds to remove a person's bodily autonomy via restrictive practice. The justification is often that a person, in this case an autistic person, is behaving in a manner that infringes upon the bodily autonomy of others. In simple terms, if your behaviour is perceived as a threat to the safety of others, then your right to bodily autonomy can be suspended. This presents a challenge to autistic people who may be prone to behaviour and performance that can be deemed unsafe. One of the challenges that arises in the interpretation of what is necessary for the safety of others. The use of restrictive practice and subsequent denial of autonomy is not broadly standardised, and usually the decision to use such practice is at the discretion of those with greater privilege than the person being restrained or secluded. This raises questions about the perception of behaviour in Western culture. Autistic people are regularly victimised by ableist attitudes and the normativity they are founded upon. There is an attitude that one should think, feel and behave in such a way as to cost systems as little as possible while maximising your production of capital. This means that the target of neuronormative society is to have people behave in such a way as to benefit neoliberal capitalism. With regard to restrictive practice, it can be assumed that it's used proliferated to not only due to normatives, This means that the target for neonormative society is to have people behave in such a way to benefit neoliberal capitalism. With regard to restrictive practice, it can be assumed that its use is proliferated not only due to neuronormative standards, but also because it costs less to restrain an autistic person when they're distressed than it does to create an environment to be more accommodating of their needs. Further to this is the growth of autism industrial complex, wherein interventions for autistic behaviours have become a hugely lucrative business. Many organisations produce high profits from the sale and implementation of restrictive practice training. This means that there is a financial incentive to normalise the use of restraint and discourage the alteration of environments that trigger the ambiguous vector of challenging behaviour. What do people think so far?
I like what David's saying here. He's saying some fairly, challenging things, in a subtle kind of educated way, which hopefully goes under the radar.
We can see then that not only do autistic people find themselves perceived to have less of a right to bodily autonomy, their autonomy is for sale. Financial interests encourage those with privilege to create broader thresholds for the use of restrictive practice on autistic people and subsequently compound the disproportionate use of force against an already marginalised group. This forms a foundation from which we can see the unethical nature of restrictive practice across a broad spectrum. It may be argued that these ethical arguments do not only apply to autistic people, but it should be considered that many of the justifications for such practice favour the liberal use of such practice more so for autistic people than for non-autistic people. It should also not be forgotten that there are wider issues in how autistic people are perceived and the impact this has on society that seems such denial of autonomy acceptable. It is time that systematic powers took more accountability for the unethical applications of such practice and their disproportionate use against autistic people. And this was the thought of David Gray Hammond. So it's quite powerful stuff here, and the reason I took a break because I wasn't actually sure when it was finishing, but now it has. What's people's thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's like you said, it is a really powerful piece, and it's like I find it like terrifying to imagine like being in that situation where somebody else is deciding whether or not you're going to be like physically or chemically restrained, and for autistic behavior to be misinterpreted as a violence risk. Oh, that's just horrible. And it's really important that he's bringing attention to this. I don't know what else to say just now.
No, there's a lot there to digest. Going to take a wee. I mean, I feel these currents are in the air, and David picks up on stuff like that at times. My thoughts straight to things like the trade wars that are going on just now between states, and the self, personal identity can be seen like that kind of construction. And so the personal autonomy being made criminal because of its lack of productivity or its challenging behavior. These are things we have to be aware of. They're going on. And so it is a deep discussion to be had here.
It does bring up a point. I mean, when you talk about capitalism, it sounds like you're going on a sort of political sort of kind of rant, but you're not. Well, I don't think so. You're just talking about the way society is, and the society we currently live in is about finance, it's about money, it's about what costs money, what costs less, what makes profit, etc. So that's always going to come into play, even in these sort of situations. And that's why things are as they are for many people. But just thinking that we were restrained. I mean, the first time I've ever heard of that word restrain was one time before my diagnosis. I was in an adolescent unit in Glasgow, and I was going through a hard time. I was kind of not long in the unit, and this was actually myself. This was me. What do you call it? I wasn't forced to go in. I wanted to. It was like self-admittance basically, because I wanted to, find out what was wrong, because I felt there was something incredibly wrong with me, and I was like feeling suicidal and things. I went, we need to get to the bottom of this. And I think there was just one time I just sort of kind of lashed out and started kind of hitting a door out of frustration. I can't remember what happened, but something triggered me. And the two nurses ran to me and they held me to calm me down. And that felt that was what they were doing, was restraining. But they didn't kind of tie me to a bed or anything, but it was like a physical sort of kind of like calm down. And thinking about it, that's actually probably the worst thing you can do to an autistic person. But they didn't know I was autistic. I didn't know I was autistic at the time. But it did calm me down. I did actually speak to one of them afterwards, and I felt all better. I actually felt a bit better, considering. But just thinking that happening to people, a misunderstanding, someone, or you're being a bit, just misinterpreted, or even, dare I say, abuse. Somebody, a bit of power, because you do get that, and people just being kind of thrown about or tied to a bed and all that. It's all that stuff you kind of worry about that will be happening to people, and there will be a lot of cases, and that's what David was alluding to as well. It's interesting, and it's quite hard kind of reading that, just knowing that it's good to read it because it's getting talked about and it's getting raised, but it's quite kind of heart-wrenching to know that there's many people that are within a system that's not helping them.
I think we have a policy that maybe hasn't been explicit but is implied here at Autistic Radio. We cooperated with the UK Society for Behaviour Analysts on the basis partly because they are aligned with the Restraint Reduction Network here in the UK, and the same for the PBS conference that we are cooperating with from Build, who are also part of the Restraint Reduction Network. The Restraint Reduction Network is called a Coalition of the Willing, an independent network which brings together committed organisations providing education, health and social care services with an ambitious vision to reduce reliance on restrictive practices and make a real difference in the lives of people. Now, an awful lot of people in the autistic community have experienced restraint, and there is a suspicion that the Restraint Reduction Network itself is also part of the autism money-making construct, and that there is suspicion that people who take courses to reduce restraint are actually ending up using slightly different techniques, and the individual is not necessarily receiving the best care. So this is a very difficult area. Human beings restrain each other, take control of each other and hold power over each other, and they do it within a structure in society that they do as a paid job. So it's really good that David Gray Hammond is bringing this forward, and it would be interested to speak with him at length, perhaps in one of our broadcasts at some point.
The next post is from Steve O's Autistic Surplus, who's a digital creator, ADHD meme guy dealing with chronic pain and just life in general. And what he shared is the following. The world is an even more scary place than it usually is to be a different person at the moment. Be it disabled, autistic, transgender. The world is even more scary place than it is to be a different person at the moment. Be it disabled, autistic, transgender, BIPOC, or any other person who is not visibly and openly white, cis, typical, and straight. Every day, people in positions of power are saying the most dehumanising shit about anyone who dares to diverge from the social norms. Making laws that strip people of their rights, making decisions that affect the support, understanding, and aid those people need and deserve. Debating whether they have a right to exist and the terms of their existence. People are applauding what is pretty much a reset and all the progressive work and forward thinking we as a society and as a human race have pushed for and worked towards for such a long time. Celebrities are being seen as heroes who are fighting against what has been deemed a woke virus, when in reality they're just dismantling a virus which is just basic human kindness and saying people should have the right to exist without having to conform to a very outdated view of humanity. At the moment, if you fit into their world of normal, you are safe. But the thing is once they run out of different people to blame, then their view will turn to you. Defend and support the vulnerable now, because the elite will always need someone to call parasites, and it could be you next. It's quite powerful and intense, this particular post, but I felt it was very important to share because of the current political and the current kind of political and societal kind of environment we currently are living in, which itself is, it's actually tearing a lot of people apart in terms of equalities and things because of different perspective of different things. And it is very concerning for many people in the community, especially if you're perceived as different from the so-called norm. So what's people's thoughts?
It's like, which group's going to be the next scapegoat for society's ills?
Yeah, we are very much on the list. Neurodivergent people, neurodiversity are very much on the list. And you've got two choices. You either put your head down and try to pretend it's not happening, or you do something within your own atmosphere, within your own powers, within your own level of safety to stand against these thoughts. I choose to stand against these thoughts by speaking here on Autistic Radio, and other people can do that too. The real historical issue is that we are in a phase of society that is very much like the late 20s, early 30s where different groups and societies are blamed by the people in power for the inequality that they create. So the scapegoats are being pointed to so that we scapegoat parts of our society and don't notice the real people with the power. And there was a poem that was written about the 1930s that went along the lines of, first they came for one group, and then it didn't worry me because I wasn't part of that group. And then they came for another group, and then they came for another group, and then they came for me. So within your own safety zone and within your own comfort, it is important to speak against what might seem the overwhelming odds. But remember, the algorithm that you are exposed to makes things look a lot bleaker than it really is. So don't believe that these people have all the power. They don't.
And you have to remember what happened to those people in the past who performed like that.
Many people have short memories, even with things that may appear obvious or whatever you want to put. I mean, the thing that gets me is I'm just seeing a lot of pain, a lot of people being trodden on. And it's not just, about a lot of this stuff. It's about, people, people on benefits and all that are getting attacked as well. It's like just picking. It just seems like they're choosing to pick in different people. They're picking in immigrants as well. And it's just like, it seems like everybody, it's just like they're picking in different people and blaming all these different sections of people in society. And it doesn't actually make sense in what they're saying. But despite it in my head not making sense, some people are buying into it just because of the way it's been sold, the way it's been presented. And I'm glad that I'm involved in, things such as this, as Autistic Radio, and other kind of positive kind of community movements, because it'd be a very lonely place without that, because of the way things are going. It's just the hurt that I'm seeing. It's getting lashed out, and it's just, that's what's getting to me the most. There's a lot of the kind of political stuff in that as well, but it's just people being targeted, and targeted in a big way and a bad way. And I just find it absolutely atrocious. It's happening so many. Leave people alone. If they're not hurting you, leave them alone. But it's just, as Jules says, though, a lot of these things are blown up to be not more of an issue. It is a big issue, but it's like there's a big power surge that may not be there. But there's certainly something there that should be kept an eye on and resisted against, because people have been fighting for rights and equalities for such a long time. And what they're doing, or certain people are doing, is they're trying to split people that have got equalities for their own. They've got their own campaigns, their own aims to make things better for the people they represent, the people that they feel that have been basically treated badly in the past. And it's like they're splitting these groups, or trying to split these groups apart, and say, see that person over there? They're within a group that's the real enemy, not us, not the ones that are taking all the money, blah, 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 but they're the real enemy. And if people say something a certain way, sometimes that can convince people to turn. And that's what kind of worries me. It's just people being targeted the way they're being targeted at the moment. And I just find it horrible at a personal level, at a human level. The next post is from Spectrum Sloth, which is a personal blog described as a late diagnosed 50-something autistic woman in the UK, hoping to help to create a supportive community where we can share our thoughts and experiences. Jeff the cat, Northern Lights, nature, the sky, glimmers, memes, sloths, she, her. And what she shared was the following. This morning, I saw one of the worst examples of someone being mocked for their spelling that I've seen in a long time. I was browsing Facebook, and on my local community notice board, an elderly gentleman had made a post about a really serious incident that had happened. His spelling was quite phonetic, with a few letters mixed up or missed out, but what he was saying was understandable. I scanned through the comments, and at that point, every single comment was someone mocking him about his spelling. A serious incident had happened which he was trying to tell us about, and all people could do was laugh at him. I often find these community groups a bit of a cesspit, to be honest, but tend to stay just to know what's going on locally. I jumped in anyway and called people out, thoroughly expecting to end up having to remove myself from the group for my own mental health. But, to my surprise and relief, others then followed in calling them out, and admin even ended up doing some blocking. The gentleman came back on the post and said he was dyslexic, but doing his best. But none of what happened to begin with was okay. I'm glad people rallied in the end. But he should have, but none of what happened to begin with was okay. I'm glad people rallied in the end, but no one should have to disclose they are dyslexic just to be treated humanely. There are many reasons someone may not get their spelling and grammar correct. Maybe they are dyslexic. Maybe they were in a huge rush and didn't have a chance to check what they wrote. Maybe English isn't their first language. Or they live in a different region to you where something may be spelled differently. There are so many maybes. And I say this from a place of kindness, as spelling and grammar was always my thing. I know for us neurodivergent folk, who maybe have languages as hyperfocus or skill, it can itch your brains a bit if someone types there instead of there. And if I'm honest, there is a time where I would correct people too, not in a mocking way though, just in need to correct kind of way. But when we know better, we do better, right? Correcting spelling and grammar without being asked to can lead to alienation and important connections being lost. Imagine coming to a group looking for advice and having your grammar corrected. Suddenly that group feels very unsafe and you're unlikely to stick around for the advice. I recently left a stargazing group as the very first post I saw was from the admin who made a post to correct someone's grammar. I mean, what the heck? And just look at today's example, where everyone was talking about spelling and the original reason behind the post was totally lost. I also believe that it's not okay to put someone down because of their spelling or grammar or how they look, speak, etc., even if you feel they are not a nice person and they deserve it. You then become an unsafe person to anyone who shares these traits and challenges. Anyway, mini rant over. My brain's still not quite braining after being poorly. So please feel free to tell me if I've done something daft or missed out anything important. Thanks. So basically a post that kind of demonstrating how harsh for social media can be, and I have witnessed that in many occasions. Even when someone's bringing up a very important point, or even just asking for help, I've seen that happen. And this could affect a lot of people, including people who are autistic as well, and many autistic people, as that was claimed there, that may be tempted to actually correct people. What's other people's thoughts on this?
I think my experience of autistic people is that there's a group of them that take real pleasure in being pedantic, take real pleasure in correcting people on simple things like old-fashioned grammar when language might have changed, or the use of a word when a word might have multiple meanings. And I think that's unfortunate. It's a stereotype that, unfortunately, is negative for us generally. But some autistic people persist in carrying on in that way because they can't help it, I suppose. They have to do that because that's what gives them a feeling of control and power. It's unfortunate, but it happens.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of rebound or even reverse psychology there. You know, when you feel disempowered and all that, or you feel like you've had to struggle really hard for communication, you become the expert, you know, and it's your job then to fight that corner whenever you see it, even if it treads on other people's, you know, autonomy and freedom, you know. And it is unfortunate, but I can see why people do it too. I was reflecting a bit on the person's self-description after the previous post. They mention that hoping to create a supportive community where we can share our thoughts and experiences. And I think that's relevant. I don't know if social media is the best place for that, but again, you know, it's often where people are in this current culture. But there is no correct way to spell. There's no correct way to communicate. People should realise this. And here's me, the expert, saying this is what people should do. But no, it just annoys me, really, at times that there isn't that kind of flow or freedom. Because people say, oh, I don't know what you mean. You must mean something. What do you mean? But so, and yet there are dependencies that people have in being able to relate to each other through those forms of communication. So it's a halfway house. You have to, it's a balancing act. But people shouldn't be nasty. Yeah, that's a no-brainer, that one.
I found that having to disclose in order to be treated humanely, like that's like almost that's the point in common, isn't it? Like for autistic people having to disclose your autism in order to be treated humanely, and for dyslexic people to have to disclose that in order to be treated humanely. It's just like, that's the common part. The other thing that stood out to me was like, oh, this, like that mean behavior from people and the mocking. Like I like it reminds me of when I was younger, before I kind of was as discerning about where I spent my time online and in person, because I'm just not around that kind of meanness now very often. But it's so discouraging, and I think it's really, really hard not to kind of focus on that over the positive stuff that's going on, because it just is so, it stands out as so cruel.
Yeah, I mean, even being an admin of pages, not so much Autistic Radio, but being, you know, admin of a community page. I'm actually an admin of a couple of notice boards, and I've not seen too much mocking, in fairness. I mean, I do, as an admin, I do try and keep a handle on things, and what I've had to do actually is ban certain words and things like that because there was people just using inappropriate language, you know, things that can get you into trouble. But people, it just seems there's this attitude that you can type and put what you want. It's something you wouldn't say to someone's face. It's like, the way people kind of treat each other online, especially social media, especially if they don't agree with them in something, they just start this sort of, it just becomes quite nasty. And I see it all over. And there's these pages that I used to kind of be involved in. They were like pages that were meant to be, joke pages. And I quite enjoyed some of them. But some of the jokes they came out with was quite vicious. It was like, it was targeting a section of people for no good reason. And it started talking about woke and all that. And as soon as it started, I went, I'm away. This is one of these nasty ones where it just wants to absolutely kind of destroy everybody. I like humour, enjoy a laugh, and I think we all could do a laugh every now and again, considering life itself and considering how things can be at the moment. It's just social media environment in many ways is so brutal. But as you say, Nicola, it's also a positive side. It brings people together. It creates a safe space for some people, depending what it is. So it's all about balancing. But it's good to highlight these sort of things because just to balance it out, just to be aware of the things that aren't so nice, but also highlight the things that are pretty good. And it's not all doom and gloom because in many ways it can feel that way, especially when things are quite intense, in the outside world. And a lot of people are talking about the same thing and they've all got different opinions on it and there's arguments, debates all over. It's just good that you can show places which is safer and people don't feel that, intimidated.
A friend of mine's like really clever about computers, and like in one conversation he was talking to me about bots and how he thought it should be so much more transparent online when you're interacting with a bot. And it makes me think, I wonder how many mean comments are by bots just kind of like spreading that as well. And that kind of makes me feel a wee bit better about human nature when I think maybe lots of the online stuff might just be like really neggy bots.
Well, bots usually have oh sorry, I'm eating and talking. Bots usually have machine-like names.
No, they don't. I'm going to absolutely disagree with you, Raymond. It was recently reported that we have now reached a level where more than 50% of internet traffic is conducted by bots. Now, bots are automated programs that do all kinds of things on the internet, and there are legitimate bots called web crawlers and other ones that scrape data, and the internet wouldn't work if these bots weren't out there doing their automatic thing. They estimate that about 10% of internet traffic is those. The other 40% is bots created by criminals or by political groups in different countries intended to create problems, to try and crack passwords, to try and take over websites, or to automatically post through fake accounts that look perfectly normal with perfectly normal names, and even create their own web presences automatically using AI. So you do not know if you are speaking with a bot, and you do not know by names of things whether they are bots. A lot of people who are up to mischief, who are actually human beings, make their usernames things that people might believe are something different and a long way away from their actual name. So the reality of the situation is very much of the internet is purposely fake, created by bad actors.
I take that point, yeah, because I'd been seeing a lot of randomly generated names, which are probably more human than bot, because that's just somebody just trying to depersonalize themselves to a certain extent and a certain type of anonymity, but human generated. Whereas bots aren't, as you say, always machine generated. They're human generated to a certain extent, you know, to create kind of fake presence. And yeah, I can't think of the other word I was going to use there. Propaganda is certainly, yeah, my brain's mince.
Yeah, sorry if I came a bit strong there, Raymond, because this is really important. There's 20% of people using smartphones out there that don't even know the basic premise that their feed, what they see on their smartphone, is different and personalised from everybody else. 20% of the people using smartphones, mostly people who have come to it later in life, don't realise that there's an algorithm out there that chooses what they see, and that they are put into a tunnel of very similar things.
Yeah, that's why I say my brain is mince. It's like I find all this too big to even conceive of in my head, because I can't really feel it. It's all tech is suspect in my response. So, but you know, I have to navigate certain aspects of it. Like I'm on part of it now, but this is more human to a certain extent.
Well, that's us coming near the end of the broadcast. So it's another good discussion tonight. Discussed so many different things in this Easter Sunday. So thank you very much for everyone that's taking part tonight. And a special thanks to people that share those posts that we're able to share and discuss. So thank you again. So this is Harry's Facebook for Sunday the 20th of April 2025, which is Easter Sunday. And I look forward to, once again, have a conversation about Facebook books. Once again, it doesn't matter, I'm done. So thank you for listening, and I hand over to Jules.
Hiya, thanks, Harry. A great show as usual. Such a lot to think about. This is the point of the show where we talk about some of the work that we do here on Autistic Radio and the work of Autistic Association, the charity that we created as autistic people to support Autistic Radio. I'm just going to try and encourage people to understand what we do here.